She mopped the marble floors of a building she could never afford to enter as a guest. He was the janitor, quiet, invisible, and forgotten by the world. Every morning, he cleaned the private helipad of a company that made millions from dreams he was never allowed to have. But one afternoon, something happened that would flip that power dynamic forever. When the CEO, young, white, and proud of her empire, mocked him in front of her team, it seemed like just another day of humiliation. "I'll marry you if you can fly this helicopter," she joked, laughing with her staff. No one expected him to reply, and no one expected what came next. Because beneath that uniform and quiet smile was a story that didn't fit anyone's expectations, a story that would leave the entire company speechless and the CEO questioning everything she believed about status, success, and skin color. Who really holds the power when truth takes flight? And before we begin, tell me, where are you watching this from? For years, Marcus had lived in the shadows of the city's tallest buildings, structures that touched the clouds while he struggled just to stay grounded. He worked the night shift at a luxury corporate tower, cleaning offices where decisions worth millions were made by people who didn't even know his name. To them, he was the janitor. To himself, he was a man trying to survive, sending money to his sick mother, saving what little he could, and dreaming of a day when life might finally look different. He took pride in his work. Every polished floor, every spotless glass wall, his silent signature. But no one noticed. They only saw the uniform, the gloves, the broom. In that building, appearances meant everything. Suits were power. Silence was invisibility. Each morning, as dawn broke, Marcus would pause at the rooftop helipad before heading home. He'd watch the sleek company helicopter rise into the pink sky, blades slicing the air like freedom itself. He'd always loved flight, the sound, the precision, the control. But in this world, men like him weren't meant to fly. What Marcus didn't know was that soon, that rooftop would no longer be a place of quiet wonder, it would become the stage for a moment that shattered every assumption about who he really was. It started with whispers, the kind that echo in polished hallways when people think you can't hear. "He's just the janitor," they'd say, stepping around his mop bucket as if his presence somehow dirted the air. Marcus had learned to stay quiet, to smile politely, to make himself small in a space that rewarded arrogance and punished humility. But lately, something inside him was shifting. Every morning, he watched the white CEO, Rebecca, arrive in style, tailored suit, designer heels clicking across the marble floor, eyes too busy to notice the man who held the door for her. She built her reputation on confidence and control, but her laughter, sharp and dismissive, cut deeper than any insult. One afternoon, as the staff prepared for a high-profile investor visit, Rebecca's helicopter pilot called in sick. The schedule was tight, and frustration filled the room. When Marcus stepped in to clean the conference area, a young intern joked, "Hey, maybe the janitor can fly it." The room burst into laughter. Rebecca turned, smirking. "Sure," she said, crossing her arms. "I'll marry you if you can fly that helicopter." The mockery stung more than he expected. Years of restraint cracked beneath the surface. She didn't know, no one did, that before this job, Marcus had spent a decade in the military, serving as a certified rescue pilot. A crash had grounded him, and discrimination had kept him from getting another chance. The janitor uniform wasn't who he was, it was what life had forced him to wear. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. Her laughter replayed in his mind, blending with memories of comrades, training drills, and skies that once belonged to him. He looked at his hands, the same hands that had once guided lives to safety, and realized how far he'd fallen in their eyes. The next morning, he arrived early, before sunrise. The helipad glistened with dew. The helicopter sat there, idle, waiting. He ran his hand along its frame, feeling the cold metal pulse beneath his fingertips. He knew every switch, every control, every vibration of an engine like this. Flying had once been his language, the sky his only equalizer. Inside, employees started arriving. Rebecca's voice echoed up the stairwell, sharp with irritation. The investors had arrived early, and the replacement pilot was still an hour away. Time was running out. When she saw Marcus near the helicopter, her brow furrowed. "What are you doing up here?" she demanded. The staff exchanged awkward glances. But before he could answer, the investors turned toward the scene, curious. And in that split second, Marcus made a choice. He climbed into the cockpit. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The engine roared to life, blades slicing through the morning air. Rebecca shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the rising hum of power. Marcus' face was calm, focused, like a man stepping back into his purpose. From the rooftop edge, the employees watched in disbelief. The janitor wasn't supposed to touch the controls. He wasn't supposed to know how. Yet the helicopter lifted smoothly, steady and sure, circling above the city with precision no amateur could fake. As the crowd stared in stunned silence, Rebecca's smirk vanished. Her joke had turned into a reckoning, and deep down, she felt it. But Marcus wasn't done. He was about to show them that the man they overlooked was never beneath them. He had simply been waiting for the right moment to rise. The helicopter hovered over the skyline, glinting in the morning sun like a defiant symbol of everything Marcus had been denied. Down below, employees crowded the rooftop, phones out, faces frozen between awe and disbelief. For years, they'd looked right through him, now they couldn't look away. Rebecca's voice cracked through the radio, demanding he land immediately. But her tone was different this time, no arrogance, just panic. The investors watched in stunned silence as the janitor executed perfect maneuvers that even trained pilots struggled to match. It wasn't recklessness. It was control. It was proof. When Marcus finally brought the helicopter down, the silence on that rooftop felt heavy, thick with something more than shock. Rebecca's face was pale, her confidence drained. But as he stepped out, the tension in the air twisted. Security rushed forward, hands gripping his arms as if he were a threat. "Get your hands off me," he said quietly, but they didn't listen. To them, a black man in a pilot's seat could only mean one thing: danger. It didn't matter that he had just saved their schedule or that his flight had been flawless. All they saw was what they'd always seen: someone who didn't belong. The crowd murmured, phones still recording, capturing every second of the humiliation. Rebecca tried to speak, but her words faltered under the weight of her own hypocrisy. Marcus didn't resist, he just stood there, head high, eyes steady. The truth didn't need defending, it had already flown circles above their prejudice. If you're feeling the power of this moment, hit subscribe, these stories deserve to be heard. Then one of the investors stepped forward, a retired Air Force officer, eyes narrowed in recognition. "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "I know this man." He pulled a photo from his phone, an old image of Marcus in uniform, standing beside a rescue chopper. His Captain Marcus Reed. He flew missions that saved dozens of lives. The rooftop went still. The guards released him slowly. The investors exchanged stunned looks. And Rebecca, her face turned red, her gaze trembling as the truth sank in. The man she mocked, the man she called just a janitor, had once held the lives of heroes in his hands. Marcus met her eyes, calm but resolute. "You said you'd marry me if I could fly," he said quietly, the faintest hint of irony in his voice. "Guess I just did." Her laughter was gone. So was her power. In that moment, it wasn't about titles or wealth, it was about truth. The man they dismissed had just reclaimed his sky. But as the cameras kept rolling and the clip began to spread online within minutes, no one yet realized this was only the beginning of the storm that would change everything. The video of Marcus's flight spread across the internet faster than anyone expected. Within hours, headlines flooded social media. Janitor turns out to be decorated pilot, racist CEO's joke backfires, from mops to missions. What was meant to be a moment of mockery had become a mirror, forcing people everywhere to confront how easily talent, dignity, and humanity are dismissed when hidden behind the wrong skin color. Rebecca's company released a carefully worded statement about diversity and inclusion, but the damage was already done. Investors pulled away, employees resigned, and the world saw her not as powerful, but as small. For Marcus, though, it wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. He hadn't planned to expose anyone. He had simply reminded the world that respect isn't earned through titles, it's deserved through being human. Weeks later, Marcus stood again on that rooftop, this time invited, not ignored. A local news crew interviewed him about second chances and unseen stories. When they asked what message he wanted to share, he looked out over the city skyline and said, "Everyone has a sky. Some of us are just told we can't reach it." His words struck a chord far beyond that rooftop. Messages poured in from people who'd faced their own quiet humiliations, workers overlooked, veterans forgotten, dreamers told they didn't belong. Marcus's story became more than viral content. It became a symbol of what happens when truth refuses to stay grounded. Rebecca eventually tried to apologize publicly, but Marcus didn't need it. Forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for him. Because he knew that carrying anger meant staying tethered to the past, and he'd already learned how to rise above. The company that once ignored him offered him a corporate role in leadership training. He declined. Instead, Marcus founded an aviation program for underprivileged youth, teaching kids who looked like him that the sky was never off limits. And maybe that's what justice really looks like, not humiliation or revenge, but transformation. This wasn't just a story about a man and a helicopter. It was about what happens when we strip people of identity until they have to prove their worth in ways they never should. Because racism isn't always loud, it's often hidden in laughter, in lowered expectations, and in the silence of those who should speak up. So the question remains, how many more Marcus Reeds will the world overlook before it finally learns to see them before they soar?